Do you ever find yourself just going through the motions, speaking lines from a script you never quite remember signing up for? Or perhaps you feel like you're constantly auditioning for a role, trying desperately to impress some unseen director, even though it's a part you don't truly want.
Yeah, that feeling.
That persistent, unsettling feeling of being off or perpetually not enough. It's an incredibly common human experience, isn't it? It just sort of gnaws at us, this sense that there's a disconnect between who we are and who we feel we must be to simply exist in the world.
It absolutely is, and it's perhaps one of the most fundamental challenges of modern existence. This feeling of incongruence, of being out of sync with our authentic self. It touches nearly every aspect of our lives, from our personal relationships to our professional aspirations, even, our quiet moments alone.
Precisely. And that's really the core of our mission today. We're taking a deep dive into the very essence of human existence, peeling back the layers to explore the intricate relationship between our inner selves, the powerful, often invisible societal pressures we face, and, well, the ancient wisdom traditions that have, for millennia, illuminated a path towards a more authentic, integrated, and ultimately compassionate life.
Right.
Our goal isn't just to define terms, but to truly unpack what it means to be yourself in a world that often demands you be someone else, how societies actively shape that understanding, and maybe most importantly, how we might navigate the intricate path to a more peaceful existence, free from the often relentless constraints of the ego.
And to embark on this pretty expansive deep dive, we've drawn from a truly rich and diverse collection of sources. We're spanning millennia and disciplines, really.
Yeah.
We'll be looking at profound spiritual philosophies like Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth, which offers a contemporary lens on ancient wisdom, and we'll dig into the historical insights of Gnosticism, a fascinating early spiritual movement. We'll sit these alongside insightful psychological frameworks from pioneering figures like Carl Rogers, whose work profoundly shaped our understanding of human potential. Then we'll weave in the transformative teachings of A Course in Miracles, explore evolutionary perspectives on the very origins of morality, and finally, draw on the inspiring, sometimes witty, wisdom of modern spiritual teachers such as Alan Watts and the mythological insights of Joseph Campbell.
Wow, quite a mix.
It's a comprehensive journey, all pointing to key resonant insights about what it truly means to be human and how we might live more fully.
So let's start where so many of us experience this internal struggle with a persistent, often nagging voice in our head. You know the one?
Oh, yeah.
The one that whispers or even shouts that we're not quite enough, that we need to do more, be more, have more. It's so pervasive, so constant, that it often feels like it is us, our core identity. But what if it's not? What if that voice, that internal monologue, is something constructed?
That's a crucial distinction, and it's precisely what many of these sources refer to as the ego. The ego, at its fundamental core, is an identification with form. Now, that sounds a bit abstract, I know.
Yeah, a little.
But primarily, it means an identification with thought forms. It's the constant stream of thinking, judging, comparing, and analyzing that we often mistake for our true self. The ego's deepest, most unexamined, and often unconscious assumption is a foundational belief. I am not enough.
Right, that core feeling.
Exactly. This single pervasive belief drives an immense amount of our behavior and internal experience. It fuels a constant underlying need to play a role in order to get what I need to be fully myself, or, to put it another way, to endlessly strive to get more so that I can be more. It's a relentless, unquenchable thirst for completion that can never really be satisfied externally.
So it's not just a feeling of inadequacy, but a perpetual performance designed to fill this imagined void. That really resonates because it speaks to so much of the anxiety and striving we see in the world today. But if this is the core belief, I am not enough, how does that core feeling of insufficiency actually manifest in our day-to-day lives? What does it look like when the ego is running the show?
Well, it manifests in incredibly subtle and often deeply destructive ways, both internally and in our interactions with others. This core feeling of insufficiency drives behaviors that maybe on the surface might seem innocuous, but are rooted in a desperate need for validation.
Like what, for instance?
Think about habitually telling certain kinds of lies, not necessarily malicious, overt falsehoods, but perhaps exaggerations about achievements, inflated accounts of our importance, or subtly misrepresenting our abilities or possessions. These are all designed to appear more important, more special, and to enhance their image in the minds of others. you know?
Yeah, puffing ourselves up a bit.
Exactly. It's about inflating who we know, what our accomplishments are, or how much we own. Because the ego uses these external identifiers to construct a sense of worth. Beyond that external projection, some individuals, driven by this profound, deep-seated feeling of insufficiency, even engage in habitual, compulsive fantasizing about oneself, weaving elaborate, often fictional narratives about their lives or future successes.
Wow.
These aren't just idle daydreams. They're compulsive mental acts designed to shore up a fragile self-image in the absence of true internal validation.
That's intense. So it's not just about what we project to others then, but also the elaborate stories we tell ourselves, often unconsciously. And it sounds exhausting.
It is. And it goes even deeper than that into how we relate to reality itself. The ego, ironically, loves its resentment of reality. It thrives on negativity, on unhappiness, on problems.
Who loves that stuff?
Yeah, it constantly searches for what's wrong, what's missing, what's unfair, because identifying with these external problems gives it a sense of identity and purpose. One of our sources describes how the ego effectively works to create hell on earth for the individual, yet without any conscious recognition of what it's doing.
Jeez.
The ego's inability to recognize its own destructive patterns, its self-imposed suffering, is described as staggering and unbelievable. It's as if it's completely blind to the prison it's meticulously constructing around itself.
That reminds me of Jean-Paul Sartre's famous line, "Hell is other people."
Yeah.
Our sources actually describe that very phrase as the voice of the ego.
That's a powerful and, kind of chilling connection, because it suggests the ego actively pushes us into conflict with others.
It truly is. That statement, "hell is other people," perfectly encapsulates the ego's deep-seated fear and distrust of other people. The ego operates from a place of scarcity and competition, always comparing itself and always feeling threatened.
It has an inherent tendency to emphasize otherness by constantly focusing on perceived faults in others, magnifying them, and then taking those faults and making them someone's entire identity. Think about how easily we label someone based on a single mistake or maybe a political affiliation.
Right, we do that all the time.
In extreme cases, this process can escalate to the point of making others into inhuman monsters, dehumanizing them to justify our own anger, resentment, or even aggression. The profound paradox of the ego is that while it desperately needs others for validation, for someone to perform for, to compare itself to define itself against deep down, it also hates and fears them.
Wow. Needs them and hates them.
Yeah. This is why the stronger the ego operates within you, the more likely you are to perceive other people as the main source of problems and suffering in your life.
So this ego is constantly constructing our internal world, a kind of self-serving narrative based on not enough and self-preservation. It sounds like a deeply isolating and stressful way to live. But what happens when that internal world, this carefully constructed identity, this self-concept, clashes with who we truly are at a deeper, more innate level?
That's a profound question, and it's precisely where modern psychology, particularly the work of Carl Rogers, offers us a really powerful framework for understanding this internal split. Rogers identified this phenomenon as incongruence.
Incongruous, okay.
It's essentially a fundamental gap, a mismatch between two distinct aspects of ourselves, our organismic self and our self-concept.
Okay, let's break those down because they sound key. What exactly is the organismic self? Is that like our biological urges or something?
It's broader than just urges. The organismic self is your raw, unfiltered flow of experiencing. Imagine a newborn baby. Their cries, their joy, their curiosity are all completely spontaneous and unedited.
Pure reaction.
That's kind of it. It's your innate wisdom, your gut feelings before you've had time to intellectualize them. It's that spontaneous joy that bubbles up when you see something beautiful, or the surge of anger you feel when your boundaries are genuinely crossed, or a child's inherent boundless curiosity that drives them to explore everything in their environment without judgment. This is the unedited, deeply authentic self, oriented towards growth and fulfillment.
Okay.
This part of us knows, on a fundamental level, what feels nourishing and what feels harmful, long before our intellect steps in to categorize or judge. It's often described as an innate wisdom geared towards growth, a natural compass pointing us towards what truly serves our well-being.
And the self-concept. That sounds like a more curated, perhaps even polished version of ourselves.
Yeah.
Like our LinkedIn profile, maybe.
Well, maybe a bit more complex than that, but yes, exactly. The self-concept is the story we tell ourselves about who we are. It's a mental blueprint, a composite image, a collection of beliefs and identities. It's where we tell ourselves, I'm intelligent, or I am kind, or I am not good at public speaking.
Right.
The crucial distinction here is that this self-concept isn't necessarily built directly from that raw, unfiltered organismic experience. Instead, it's largely constructed from the reflections we get back from the world, particularly from parents, teachers, peers, and society at large, especially early in life. And this mental blueprint is very often heavily edited, filtered through the expectations and judgments of others. We learn to censor, to suppress, to present a version of ourselves that we believe will be accepted and loved.
So this editing, this gap between who we really are deep down and who we think we should be, happens because of external pressures, or what Rogers called conditions of worth. Can you elaborate on what those conditions look like in our lives? I think we all experience those.
Absolutely. Conditions of worth are the insidious, often unspoken rules of engagement we learn from a very young age. Think of messages like, be quiet and you'll get approval, which teaches us to suppress our natural expression.
Or boys don't cry.
Exactly. Or achieve high grades and then you are worthy of praise, which links our worth directly to external performance. Or even something like, suppress your anger. Nice people don't get angry, which forces us to disconnect from a natural human emotion. These are all conditions we internalize, creating what our sources aptly call a performance society.
A performance society, where we're constantly on, constantly proving our worth, almost performing for an invisible audience. That sounds incredibly exhausting and ultimately, well, pretty unfulfilling.
It is. In this society, we internalize a relentless pressure to perform, optimize, to achieve. We become our own taskmasters, pushing ourselves relentlessly towards burnout, often tragically mistaking self-exploitation for self-realization.
Wow, mistaking self-exploitation for self-realization, that hits hard.
Doesn't it? We perform not just for bosses or clients, but for an internalized ideal self, a version of us meticulously built from society's amplified conditions of worth. We feel compelled to be productive every waking moment, to maintain a positive facade, to be constantly achieving and proving our value in what has become a marketplace of attention, status, and perceived success.
It's like we're always selling ourselves.
In a way, yes. And this performance isn't just about external validation, though that's a big part. It offers a dangerous illusion of control, making us believe that if we just perform perfectly, we can control how others see us, how our lives unfold, and even how we feel. However, this diverts immense psychic energy away from genuine self-understanding and connection.
Because you're so busy maintaining the facade.
Precisely. And the profound fear underneath it all is that if others only love the performance, if they only connect with the role we play, then authentic connection becomes incredibly difficult, if not impossible. If people don't really know you, but only the character you inhabit, it fuels a vicious cycle of fear, isolation, and an even more desperate performance.
And this isn't just about work or social media, right? You're saying this performative pressure seeps into everything.
It really permeates all aspects of life. Education, for instance, often becomes less about genuine curiosity and learning and more about performing well on standardized tests. Parenting becomes fraught with the pressure to embody the perfect parent role according to ever-shifting social standards, leading to immense guilt and anxiety.
Oh, definitely.
Even our leisure activities can become performative. Are you having the right kind of fun, the kind that looks good when shared on social media, rather than simply enjoying the experience for its own sake? It's everywhere.
That's a powerful and, somewhat unsettling picture of modern life, where so much of our energy is spent on this external show. But what if there's a way to move beyond this constant internal battle, this exhausting performance, and access a deeper, more expansive sense of self, a self that doesn't need to perform?
Indeed. That's the central quest, isn't it? Bridging that painful gap of incongruence.
And this is where it gets really interesting, I think. What if that incessant voice in my head, the one that critiques, judges, and demands, isn't actually who I am at all? That's a radical thought for many of us, given how identified we are with our thoughts.
It is not just radical, it's profoundly liberating, as one of our sources, particularly Tolle, describes. What is arising now in this moment in human history is not merely a new belief system, a new religion, or another ideology. It's something far deeper and more fundamental. A new consciousness.
A new consciousness.
Yes. This emerging consciousness is characterized by the transcendence of thought. Now, this isn't about stopping thought entirely, which is an impossible and frankly undesirable goal. Rather, it's about developing a newfound ability of rising above thought, of realizing a dimension within yourself that is infinitely more vast than thought.
Right.
This means no longer deriving your identity, your fundamental sense of who you are, from the incessant stream of thinking, in what's termed the old consciousness, you simply take to be yourself. You are no longer solely defined by your thoughts.
So if the voice in my head isn't me, if I'm not my thoughts, then who am I? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It opens up entirely new possibilities.
And the answer, profoundly simple yet deeply transformative, is the one who sees that. You are the awareness that is prior to thought. You are the space in which the thought or the emotion or sense perception happens.
The space.
Yes, this place of centered awareness is the seat of the witness, the seat of self. It's the consistent, unchanging backdrop against which all your internal experiences, your thoughts, feelings, sensations unfold. It's the constant presence that observes without judgment the ever-shifting landscape of your mind.
It's almost like stepping back to observe the movie of your mind. Right. Rather than being entirely trapped inside it, completely absorbed in the plot, you become the conscious audience, not just a character caught up in the drama.
That's a perfect analogy, and we can extend it. All consciousness is fundamentally the same, like light emanating from the sun. The difference lies in where that consciousness is focused. When it's focused on itself, when it turns the light of awareness back onto its own source, deep, intuitive experiences of the true nature of self begin to emerge. You begin to realize you are tremendously expansive, far beyond the confines of your individual thoughts and egoic narratives.
Okay, explain that a bit more. How does focusing consciousness make it seem small or large?
Think about watching a really engrossing movie, for instance. You get completely absorbed. You use two senses, seeing and hearing. The synchronization of sight and sound is crucial to that absorption, right?
Yeah, totally.
Now imagine if a movie could include smell and taste. If you were experiencing a film where someone was eating and you could truly taste what they taste and smell what they smell, you would be even more caught in that one, wouldn't you? The sensory input would double, and so would the pull on your consciousness.
Definitely. I'd be completely lost in it.
Similarly, when consciousness is focused solely on small and limited objects, like the teeny screen of your thoughts or the incessant stream of internal chatter, it appears small and limited. But if you pull back, if you shift that focus, if you become the awareness of the thought rather than the thought itself, your awareness expands to encompass vast space. Your consciousness becomes independent of the inner and outer objects you happen to be aware of. You are the screen, not just the fleeting images playing on it.
This radical shift in self-perception, this idea that we are the awareness rather than merely the content of our minds, it feels profound, but it also isn't entirely new, is it? It echoes through the great spiritual traditions that have guided humanity for millennia. It suggests a kind of universal truth waiting to be rediscovered.
It absolutely does. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the historical sweep, it becomes even clearer that humanity has been grappling with these profound questions for millennia, particularly during a pivotal period known as the Axial Age.
The Axial Age, that's roughly from, 900 to 200 BCE, if I recall correctly. It sounds like a remarkable turning point in human history.
That's precisely right. It was a period of intense creativity, profound spiritual awakening, and intellectual transformation that occurred almost simultaneously, which is fascinating in itself, across four distinct, often unconnected regions: China, India, Israel, and Greece.
Wow, all at the same time.
Roughly, yes. During this extraordinary time, the great world traditions we still know and study today, like Confucianism and Taoism in China, Hinduism and Buddhism in India, monotheism in Israel, and philosophical rationalism in Greece, all came into being. And this wasn't happening in a stable, peaceful environment. Quite the contrary. It occurred against a backdrop of immense turmoil, migration, and conquest, with societies that were literally cut loose from their moorings.
So that instability, that chaos, actually prompted this deep, inward-looking.
It seems so. This instability, this breakdown of older tribal structures, often forced people to look inward for meaning, for ethical guidance, and for a deeper sense of self and community beyond their immediate clan or tribe.
So in response to that external chaos and social upheaval, these Axial Age sages looked for something deeper within themselves and within the human condition itself. What fundamental truths or insights did they discover that are still so relevant to us today?
Well, the sages of this era advanced human consciousness significantly, fundamentally shifting how humanity understood itself and its place in the cosmos. They discovered a transcendent dimension in their being, a deeper reality, an inner realm of profound wisdom and peace. Crucially, they did this without necessarily regarding it as supernatural or external in the way we might think of it now. In fact, many often preferred reverent silence when discussing these ineffable experiences.
Why silence?
Precisely because they believed human words and conventional concepts couldn't adequately describe them. This reverent silence wasn't about secrecy necessarily, but about acknowledging the limits of language and expressing ultimate truth. It invites us, even today, to seek direct experience rather than merely intellectual understanding. But more than just personal spiritual insight, these sages universally preached a spirituality of empathy and compassion. They weren't just about individual enlightenment locked away somewhere. They were deeply concerned with the flourishing of society.
Right, it wasn't just navel-gazing.
Not at all. They insisted that people abandon their egotism and greed, their violence and unkindness, recognizing these as root causes of suffering. For them, benevolence wasn't just for one's own tribe or family. It must extend to the entire world. They formulated variations of the golden rule, do not do to others what you would not have done to you, as a universal ethical imperative.
The golden rule, yeah, it pops up everywhere.
And for these axial sages, respect for the sacred rights of all beings, not orthodox belief, was religion. This is a critical distinction that challenges much of modern religious practice, emphasizing action and internal transformation over rigid dogma or just believing the right things.
That's a remarkably consistent and powerful message across such diverse cultures and philosophies. It suggests a common thread running through humanity's spiritual evolution. Can you give us some specific examples of how this compassionate ethos manifested in different traditions back then?
Certainly. Consider Judaism. Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai, a pivotal figure after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, taught that acts of loving kindness are an atonement equal to the temple itself. This was revolutionary, showing that ethical action, empathy towards others, could replace ritual sacrifice as the path to spiritual reconciliation.
Wow, that's huge. Action over ritual.
Then there's Jesus' radical concern for everybody. What the Chinese Mohist philosopher Mozi called jian-ai, or universal love, which extended to sinners and outcasts, those on the fringes of society. His challenging teaching of ahimsa, or nonviolence, famously articulated as offer the wicked man no resistance and love your enemies, was profoundly countercultural.
Still is, really.
Absolutely. This required kenosis, a Greek term meaning a radical, self-emptying love, a stripping away of one's own ego and self-interest in service of divine love and compassion for others. It wasn't about passive acceptance of harm, but an active, transformative stance of love. And in Islam, the teachings of Prophet Muhammad emphasized jihad primarily as a greater jihad, focusing on the internal struggle to reform our own societies and our own hearts, to purify oneself of egoic tendencies like greed and anger. This internal struggle was given precedence over the lesser jihad of external conflict.
The inner battle first.
Right. His teachings emphasized practical compassion and deep respect for people of an earlier revelation, like Jews and Christians, underscoring interfaith tolerance and shared spiritual lineage. These examples highlight a shared ethical bedrock, emphasizing an inner transformation that leads to outward benevolence, moving beyond tribalism to universal regard.
So this unifying axial ethos offered a path to ecstasis, literally a stepping out from self-bound consciousness, a transcendence of the ego. It sounds like a collective awakening almost. But the path isn't always clear, is it? Especially when dogmatic thinking takes hold or when spiritual insights become rigid doctrines.
That's a critical point and a challenge humanity still faces today, without a doubt.
That leads us right to today's spiritual landscape. What does this ancient wisdom mean for the modern spiritual search, especially as traditional structures shift and many people are seeking meaning outside of conventional religious institutions? It seems like there's a huge wave of spiritual seeking happening right now, sometimes in, well, unexpected places.
You're absolutely right. In the West particularly, spirituality is undergoing an entirely new development, a profound transformation. In the past, this would have been inconceivable, especially in the West, where the Christian church had a virtual franchise on spirituality. You couldn't just stand up and give a spiritual talk or publish a spiritual book without being potentially sanctioned or even censored by the church authority.
Right, it was tightly controlled.
Very. But now, not only are we seeing signs of this new consciousness emerging within certain churches, which is significant, but even more strikingly, there's a powerful wave of spiritual seeking and understanding happening entirely outside of them. This is a truly unprecedented moment for spiritual exploration.
And it seems like this quest for deeper understanding, for gnosis, as some might call it, is leading some people to surprisingly knowledgeable places. I remember hearing about a survey that highlighted atheists and agnostics, on average, knew more about religion than most followers of major faiths. That's a pretty provocative finding.
It is indeed. That specific survey from the Pew Forum on Religion and Public Life found exactly that. atheists and agnostics, perhaps because they're actively researching to form their own worldview or challenge existing ones, even outperform believers with similar education levels when tested on general religious knowledge.
Interesting.
It suggests maybe a potential reluctance by many people to dig deeply into their own beliefs and especially into those of others, which one minister quoted in the source noted is not healthy for a person of any faith. It points perhaps to a kind of passive adherence rather than an active, inquiring engagement with one's own spiritual tradition or the traditions of others. And this quest for deeper, often secret or esoteric, understanding resonates deeply with historical movements like Gnosticism, which emerged around the same time as early Christianity. Gnosticism centered on gnosis, which literally means knowledge, but not just intellectual knowledge, rather a secret, intuitive, spiritual knowledge as the true path to salvation.
Not just belief, but knowledge.
Exactly. Gnostics often viewed the material world as illusory and wicked, believing true reality lay beyond its suffering and limitations. They sought direct personal experience of the divine, often through inner contemplation and secret teachings, rather than through external rituals or dogmas imposed by a church hierarchy.
So Gnosticism was about hidden truths, not public dogma or institutional authority. It sounds like it offered a more direct, perhaps more personal route to the divine, bypassing the middleman, so to speak.
Precisely. The Gnostic Gospel of Thomas, for example, which was discovered mid-20th century, offers mysterious and secret words from a living Jesus. It promises immortality, not just intellectual understanding, for those who interpret these cryptic sayings correctly. Crucially, it doesn't focus on his birth, crucifixion, or resurrection like the canonical Gospels. It's a collection of sayings, often paradoxical, designed to provoke inner realization.
Very different feel.
Very. Similarly, the Hermeticists, dedicated to the mythical figure Hermes Trismegistus, the Greek name for the Egyptian god Thoth, the protector of knowledge, were renowned as the best spiritual directors in the ancient world. They deeply valued intellectual development and guided initiates to experience God directly, not through intermediaries, and then encouraged them to record that profound knowledge in books, effectively continuing the transmission of this gnosis. This pursuit of inner wisdom, of a direct experience of truth, is also something the great mythologist Joseph Campbell warned us about, in a way. He cautioned against taking old religious myths literally, calling it a disaster and monstrous.
Why a disaster?
He explained that mythology is a compendium of metaphors, rooted in universal bodily experiences like birth and death, designed to guide us to an inward life where consciousness is becoming more and more of itself. Taking them literally as historical or scientific facts conflates the symbol with the reality, effectively blocking the profound, transformative message the myth intends to convey about our inner spiritual journey. It's like mistaking the map for the territory, you know? The myth points inward, not primarily to external historical events.
That's a powerful and essential distinction. It seems this pursuit of inner wisdom, this deeper meaning, has also been met with resistance, sometimes from within spiritual traditions themselves, especially when rigid institutions feel threatened by that direct experience.
This raises an important and sometimes difficult question. What happens when the ego entrenches itself in spirituality, when it latches onto certainty and doctrine rather than compassionate understanding and open inquiry? The consequences, as our sources point out, can be deeply problematic. Some religious institutions, instead of opening to this new consciousness or embracing the underlying axial ethos of compassion we talked about, instead harden their doctrinal positions. They become collective egoic entities, rigidly identified with mental positions, much like political ideologies that become closed to any alternative interpretation of reality. They become impenetrable to new information or different perspectives, building walls instead of bridges.
So fundamentalism, in any form, religious or ideological, can be seen as the ego taking root in belief. It sounds like a deeply destructive force.
Exactly. This fundamentalist religion, by rigidly defining truth and often demonizing anything outside its narrow interpretation, can absorb the violence of our time. It develops a polarized vision that divides humanity into two hostile camps: the U.S. who are right and righteous, and the them who are wrong, evil, or deluded.
Yep, versus them.
Yeah. And as history tragically shows, this easily leads to atrocity. It represents a clear and dangerous preference for being right to being compassionate. And ironically, it's often counterproductive in its aims, as coercive measures are more likely to drive them in the opposite direction. Forcing belief rarely leads to genuine conversion, but often to resentment, rebellion, and further entrenchment on both sides.
So instead of bringing people closer to a spiritual truth, it pushes them away, and even fuels conflict. And history is, unfortunately, full of examples of this kind of conflict and demonization, isn't it?
Indeed. Historically, Orthodox critics made wild accusations of debauchery and hedonism against groups like the Gnostics and later the Cathars, despite their often anti-material worldviews, which typically led to ascetic practices, not hedonism.
Right, that doesn't even make sense.
It often doesn't. These accusations were frequently baseless, illustrating how those perceived as other or heretical are often caricatured and demonized to justify persecution, regardless of the truth of their practices or beliefs. This same pattern manifests today in what we might call spiritual superiority, or religiocentrism, where people believe what they believe is the ultimate truth, and if you don't believe the same thing, then you're some kind of a demon. It creates an us versus them mentality, an echo of the ego's fear of otherness, which fundamentally goes against that unifying axial age ethos of universal compassion and empathy. It's a tragic betrayal, really, of the very spiritual principles it often claims to uphold.
This divisive tendency, rooted in ego and fear, contrasts so sharply with what we've already discussed about our innate human capacity for connection and care. It almost feels like a betrayal of our fundamental design as a species.
It's a crucial contrast to highlight because it points directly towards where true healing and progress lie in reconnecting with that innate capacity.
So let's unpack this further. Where do our ideas of right and wrong, of morality, of compassion, truly come from? Is it something exclusively given to us by a divine creator? Or is it something more deeply embedded in our very humanity, maybe a part of our evolutionary journey?
That's a core debate, and our sources delve deeply into it, challenging some conventional assumptions. One side of the argument asks whether morality comes exclusively from a God the Creator, or if our humanity, including the self-control needed for livable societies, is built into us.
Okay.
The provocative claim often made, sometimes defensively, if there is no God, I am free to rape my neighbor, is directly questioned in some sources. The counter-argument is made that our ancestors likely had social norms before they had religion, long before the current major religions arose just a few thousand years ago. These norms were essential for group survival, demonstrating a foundational, practical morality needed for cooperation.
So the argument is that morality, at its roots, might actually predate formalized religion.
Yeah.
That it's a more fundamental aspect of social evolution needed for groups to stick together.
That's precisely the argument presented. Religion, while certainly relevant and having profoundly shaped moral codes and ethical systems throughout history, is presented in some sources as an add-on or perhaps an amplification of morality rather than its sole wellspring. This perspective finds some support in scientific understanding, particularly from fields like ecology, which studies the balance of nature and how every living being depends upon innumerable other living beings.
Interconnectedness.
Exactly. This interconnectedness, inherent in nature, mirrors an inherent interconnectedness in our social fabric. To be alive is to inevitably interfere with the world, but to change our often destructive path requires, as Alan Watts put it, a transformation of the feeling that we have of our own existence and of what we mean by I. It implies a fundamental shift in our self-perception, moving from seeing ourselves as isolated egos to recognizing ourselves as part of an interconnected web.
And there's actual scientific research on this, even with animals, that suggests an innate capacity for empathy and pro-social behavior, indicating these aren't uniquely human or solely divinely bestowed traits.
Absolutely. Research on primates, for instance, shows striking examples that challenge the notion of human exceptionalism and compassion. Chimpanzees and bonobos have been observed to voluntarily open a door to offer a companion access to food, even if it means losing some for themselves in the process.
Wow. Really?
Yes. Similarly, in controlled experiments, capuchin monkeys overwhelmingly prefer pro-social tokens that reward both monkeys, not just themselves, indicating a preference for fairness and shared benefit, even when they could choose a purely selfish option.
That's amazing.
These observations highlight animal empathy, demonstrating how many mammals are sensitive to each other's emotions and respond to others in need. This suggests that while altruism evolved for the advantages it confers, meaning it provided a survival benefit for the group, this does not make it selfishly motivated in the moment of action.
Ah, okay. The reason it evolved doesn't dictate the feeling behind the action.
Precisely. Just as animals engage in sex driven by an innate impulse, without necessarily knowing its reproductive consequences, similarly, the altruistic impulse seems unconcerned with evolutionary consequences in the moment. It's a genuine innate drive to help. It appears to be built into the biological fabric of many social species, a testament to its adaptive value over millennia.
Okay, so if this capacity for morality and empathy is so innate, so deeply wired into us as social creatures, why does our modern society often feel so disconnected, so isolated, even cruel at times? We clearly have the fundamental wiring for it seems.
That's a critical point and a deeply concerning one. What's fascinating here, and quite alarming, is that our modern normal might actually be increasingly aberrant for our species. Humans are social creatures by natural design. We evolved over hundreds of thousands of years in tight-knit communities, profoundly dependent on each other for survival, learning, and emotional well-being. But now, we become like fish out of water, struggling to breathe in an environment that actively pulls us apart.
Pulled apart how?
Well, over the last third of a century or so, maybe longer, we've been significantly pulled apart from one another and from our communities. This isn't just a feeling, it's a measurable decline in social cohesion and engagement across many metrics.
How so? What are the practical manifestations of this erosion of community and social connection that we see?
The manifestations are pervasive, really. Local communities have significantly declined. Instead of walking to neighborhood stores and encountering familiar faces, people now often drive, sometimes long distances, to a soulless and/or windowless facility for shopping, engaging in anonymous, often self-service transactions.
The big box store effect.
Right. Economic exchanges have become increasingly emotionally sterile, mechanized experiences, often devoid of human warmth or recognition. Church attendance and other forms of social participation like clubs, civic groups, and even informal neighborhood gatherings are waning significantly across many societies. Our neighborhoods, which once might have bustled with children playing freely in mixed age groups, are often quieter, with kids segregated into same-age groupings in schools, and families frequently moving away from extended relatives for economic reasons, leaving them feeling isolated.
And this has a profound impact on family life, especially for parents, doesn't it? It sounds like an immense burden falls on individuals or small family units.
A huge, almost unbearable impact, according to some of our sources, like Gabor. The traditional community parenting model of multi-generational clans, where aunts, uncles, grandparents, cousins, and neighbors all contributed to raising children, providing warm, responsive support, and sharing the inevitable burdens and joys, has largely vanished in many parts of the modern world.
It takes a village, as they say.
Exactly, but the village is often missing. It's been replaced by an insulated nuclear family, often just two parents or even a single parent, isolated from that extended support network. This shift, compounded by pervasive economic anxiety and the need for both parents, if there are two, to work long hours, places untenably stressful roles on parents, particularly mothers, who are often expected to both earn a living and somehow solely manage the complex psycho-emotional stresses of the family.
That sounds unsustainable.
It's argued that this is not only unnatural from an evolutionary perspective, but contributes to a life-size health hazard for both parents and children, as it leaves them incredibly vulnerable to overwhelm, burnout, and emotional depletion.
I can certainly imagine the stress. What are the long-term consequences for children growing up in this increasingly isolated and stressed environment, particularly regarding their emotional and physical well-being?
The consequences are described as dire and measurable. Children's emotional architecture is directly affected by stressed or distracted caregivers. When parents are overwhelmed, anxious, or perpetually short on time and emotional resources, it inevitably impacts a child's developing brain and nervous system. This is linked to a documented rise in mental illnesses among youth, such as ADHD, depression, anxiety, or even engaging in aggressive or self-harming behavior.
Your physical health, too.
Yes, beyond the psychological impact, the physical consequences are equally profound. Maternal mind states during pregnancy, for instance, levels of stress, anxiety, depression, have direct impacts on fetal brain chemicals and can predispose children to adult health challenges like hypertension and diabetes decades later.
Wow, that early.
It starts that early. Ancient First Nations and African tribal societies intuitively understood this profound connection between maternal well-being and child development. They had traditions preventing angry or upset people from even approaching pregnant women, recognizing the sanctity of the intrauterine environment and its profound impact on the developing child.
That's incredible wisdom.
It really is. Joni Mitchell's poignant song lyric, "We don't know what we've got till it's gone," perfectly encapsulates the tragic loss of these vital social structures and the innate community-based wisdom that guided humanity for so long.
This picture of isolation and distress is quite stark. However, it also maybe presents an opportunity for a different kind of human response, a more conscious and compassionate one. It seems like the very challenges we face could be a catalyst for growth, perhaps.
It absolutely could be. It opens a pathway for profound individual and collective transformation, if we choose to see it that way.
So given all this, the innate capacity for empathy, the societal fragmentation, what does it truly mean for how we interact with others, especially when they're struggling or when their behavior is difficult or hurtful? If we're wired for empathy and yet society pulls us apart, how do we bridge that gap and actually act from a place of compassion?
Well, the path forward involves what our sources like Alain de Botton might call attaining higher consciousness. This isn't some mystical, unattainable state reserved for a chosen few monks on a mountaintop. Rather, it's a deeply practical loosening of our ego's tenacious grip. It's about consciously choosing to activate and access the neocortex, which neuroscientists identify as the seat of imagination, empathy, and impartial judgment.
More evolved part of the brain.
Essentially, yes. This higher brain function allows us to ascend to a less biased and more universal perspective. It shifts our perception from a narrow, reactive, egocentric view to one that is broader, calmer, and more understanding.
And what does that broadened, less biased perspective reveal about others, especially when they're acting in ways that might trigger our judgment or anger? How does it change how we see them?
It allows us to imagine that others' behavior, even when it's hurtful, frustrating, or seemingly irrational, is often driven by pressures derived from their own more primitive minds, their own fear, insecurity, or pain, or, crucially, to see their actions as symptoms of hurt rather than of evil. This is a radical reframe.
Hurt, not evil.
Exactly. Instead of seeing someone as deliberately malicious or inherently bad, we begin to see their actions as potentially a cry for help, a manifestation of their own pain, confusion, and disconnection from their true self. This shift is described as an astonishing gradual evolution within human consciousness itself, leading to the profound perception that the appropriate response to humanity is not fear, cynicism, or aggression, but always, when we can manage it, love.
Always love. When we can manage it, that's key.
It is key. It acknowledges the difficulty. In this state of higher consciousness, the world reveals itself not just as a place of suffering and misguided effort, which it certainly can be, but also profoundly as a place of tenderness and longing, beauty, and touching vulnerability. You begin to see the inherent innocence, the shared humanity, behind even the most challenging behavior.
That's a truly profound reframe, transforming how we perceive conflict and suffering. Instead of judging their badness, we see their pain, their inner struggle. This reminds me so powerfully of the core teachings of A Course in Miracles.
Indeed. A Course in Miracles offers perhaps one of the clearest and most radical articulations of this principle. It teaches that the primary thought of the ego, its foundational belief, is that the Son of God is guilty. This belief in guilt, either our own or others, is the very foundation of judgment, condemnation, and separation, driving us apart from each other and from our true innocent selves.
Guilt is the root problem.
Yes. In stark contrast, the enlightened thought, the truth the Course seeks to awaken in us is, the Son of God is innocent. This means seeing beyond the ego's behavior, beyond the mistakes and the pain, to the divine spark, the inherent worthiness within every single being without exception.
That's a high bar.
It is. And the Course explains that if we react to another's guilt, their unloving behavior, their perceived flaws, we are, in that moment, falling asleep to their innocence, and thus, tragically, falling asleep to our own. We reinforce the belief in guilt itself. This perpetuates a wheel of suffering, trapping us in cycles of blame, resentment, and separation.
So reacting reinforces the problem.
Exactly. Instead, we're encouraged to center your thought into the holy instant, a moment of pure, present, non-judgmental awareness, and be willing to see this differently, realizing that others, even in their most difficult or seemingly malicious moments, are fundamentally calling for love. They've lost touch with their innocence, with their true nature, and in doing so are expressing a deep, unmet need.
This powerful insight, this call to see innocence in others, even amidst their suffering or missteps, it leads us to explore practical pathways for transformation. Not just understanding this intellectually, but how do we actually do it? How do we engage with the world in a way that heals these divisions?
It's about how we can truly live this wisdom day by day, moment by moment, which raises the important question. How do we practically apply these profound insights in the face of life's undeniable complexities, its inevitable pains, disappointments, and its challenges? It's not always easy to just let go of our reactions or judgments when we feel hurt or wronged.
It certainly isn't. Life itself, though, in its profound wisdom, seems to demand that we embrace paradox. One of our sources, Anne Lamott, maybe even suggests we must be brave enough to want to die, meaning to let go of old identities, old patterns, old attachments that no longer serve us, but also simultaneously brave enough to live, to fully embrace the present moment and whatever it brings with all its messiness and beauty.
That's beautifully put. This journey of surrender involves understanding that loss and disappointment help you shoot deep roots into your life, grounding you, because you realize that eventually it's not really about you anymore, it's about life itself flowing through you. Your personal preferences and ego demands start to diminish in importance as you connect to a larger current, a deeper reality.
So it's about surrender, but not passive resignation.
Not at all. This journey of transformation fundamentally involves a continuous surrender to the process of emptying yourself of stuff, which Michael Singer describes essentially as stored pain, blocked energy, and unresolved emotional wounds from the past. Instead of resisting pain and building protection structures around it, which are mental walls and emotional defenses that paradoxically keep us trapped in darkness and prevent genuine connection, we must learn to permit the pain to come up into your heart and pass through.
Feel it to heal it, essentially.
Exactly. But this process of letting go must happen from the seat of awareness, that witnessing consciousness we discussed earlier. This is crucial because, as Singer describes otherwise, your consciousness will be pulled into it, and you'll get lost in the disturbed feelings and thoughts, losing clarity and becoming consumed by the very pain you are trying to avoid or suppress. You identify with the pain instead of observing it pass.
So it's about observing the pain without becoming the pain, allowing it to move through you without identifying with it. Like the Taoist sailing analogy you mentioned earlier, where you work with the forces rather than fighting against them.
A beautiful and truly apt analogy from Alan Watts. Sailing, at its highest art form, requires achieving effortless action and dynamic equilibrium. It's not about fighting the wind or the waves, which is futile. It's about adjusting to the forces, being an instrument in the hands of the forces.
Becoming one with the boat and the wind.
Yes. In this state, nothing is personal. The wind isn't attacking you, the waves aren't against you. Your whole interest lies in the balance and not in any personal preference for how things should be. Just as a sailor constantly adjusts the sail and ropes to the shifting wind, constantly finding that sweet spot of balance, we navigate life by flowing with its energies, moving from balance point to balance point. When the wind shifts, you adjust at the exact same instant, without resistance or judgment. Life happens, you're present within it, responsive to it, but you don't try to force it to happen in a certain predetermined way. You become the dance, not just the dancer trying to control every single step.
And central to this profound act of letting go, this surrender to the flow of life, is one of the most powerful and often profoundly misunderstood human acts: forgiveness. It's not just about letting others off the hook for what they did, is it? It sounds like it's actually a deeply personal act of liberation for ourselves.
It is indeed a profound truth, and this is where the transformative power of this approach truly becomes apparent. Forgiveness isn't merely a nice gesture or something you do because you're supposed to. It is presented, particularly in A Course in Miracles, as a highest choice and a complex, often challenging process. It's fundamentally about being willing to see this differently, shifting your perception from judgment and grievance to understanding and release.
Willing to see it differently.
Yes. It means realizing that when someone acts in a way that is not lovingly, they haven't necessarily chosen evil in that moment. They have, in that moment, fallen asleep to the truth of who they are. They are not intentionally being evil, but are rather, from this deeper perspective, expressing their own pain and ultimately calling for love.
So if I understand this correctly, based on Course, if someone behaves badly towards me and I react with anger or resentment, I'm essentially validating the ego's belief that they are guilty or bad. And in doing so, I reinforce my own unconscious belief in guilt, maybe my own guilt, creating a vicious cycle.
You've captured it perfectly. A Course in Miracles teaches this very clearly. If I react to their guilt, I am falling asleep to their innocence, therefore I will fall asleep to mine. Reacting to their perceived guilt reinforces the ego's fundamental belief that I'm guilty, or that guilt is real and powerful, and actively prevents inner peace, keeping you trapped in a state of suffering, judgment, and separation.
Wow.
True peace, according to the Course, comes only when we are able somehow to love them and release them to whatever they are, freeing both them from our judgment and ourselves from the heavy burden of carrying that judgment and grievance. This doesn't mean condoning harmful behavior or becoming a doormat. It means releasing the emotional charge, the identification with the perceived problem, the story of victimhood.
That sounds incredibly challenging, though, especially when our ego is screaming at us to defend ourselves, to set boundaries, or to retaliate. It's like going against every ingrained instinct.
It absolutely is. It requires developing a musculature, a spiritual and emotional strength, a new kind of resilience, to counter the ego's insistent screams, to set a boundary in anger or not be loving. The ego insists you can't be loving in this moment. This is absolutely unacceptable. You must protect yourself. You must be right. They must be punished.
Yeah, that voice is loud.
Very loud. But the true miraculous response, the Course suggests, comes from centering yourself in the holy instant, that place of pure awareness beyond the ego's noise, and being willing to see this differently. It's a conscious choice, moment by moment, to shift from reaction to response, from fear to love, from grievance to forgiveness.
And there are powerful personal stories that illustrate this profound shift, right? Like Marianne Williamson's experience with her father, which you mentioned, beautifully clarifies this concept of forgiveness, not just being intellectual, but deeply emotional and healing.
Yes, her anecdote is incredibly illuminating and relatable for many. Marianne Williamson recounts intellectually understanding her father's past treatment of her, recognizing how his own unhealed pain and background likely manifested in ways that hurt her. She got it on one level.
Okay.
But the real breakthrough, the deeper healing, came when she later saw him interacting with his grandchildren, her nieces. She saw him in his role as an adoring grandfather, full of love and gentleness. In that moment, she realized that despite her intellectual understanding of his past, she still held a deep, unhealed emotional distance from him based on her own childhood experiences.
The feeling hadn't shifted.
Exactly. The profound realization came that she needed to let God to reparent her, to allow divine love or her higher self or whatever language works for you, to fill the emotional voids and heal the wounds left by past experiences, rather than continuing to hold on to the grievance or expect him to somehow retroactively fix it. The core principle, as she profoundly puts it, echoing the Course, is heaven is entered by two.
Heaven is entered by two. What does that mean?
It doesn't necessarily mean two specific people holding hands. It's a metaphor for unity, for the shared nature of our minds and our salvation. It means I cannot see guilt in you and feel peace because if I see guilt in you, I'm fortifying my belief that I'm guilty, or that guilt itself is real. When we choose to perceive innocence in another, even if it's difficult, we simultaneously awaken and affirm the innocence within ourselves. It's a shared liberation from the ego's prison of guilt and separation.
As we heal and integrate these insights, as we learn to forgive, maybe starting with ourselves, to let go of the ego's grip and to flow more with life's energies instead of fighting them, we open ourselves to a crucial human capacity that fuels our future, individually and collectively.
Hope. You've hit on a vital point. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, especially in a world that often feels chaotic, uncertain, and even overwhelming with challenges, how do we cultivate genuine hope? This isn't about naive optimism, like just ignoring reality or pretending everything's fine. It's something far more powerful and active.
No, it's definitely not merely idle longing or a form of greed, just hoping for something good for ourselves. Hope, in this context, as described by figures like Joanna Macy, is something in us feeling into the probabilities that have not yet become physical and choosing what we contribute to with our energy. It's an active engagement with the future, a participation in its unfolding.
That's a powerful definition.
It is. The sources emphasize that refusing to use this profound human capacity for hope means we can be truly defeated by circumstances, by despair. Hope is presented almost as an inner strength, our capacity to shape possibility through our intention and attention.
This profound capacity is further described as hope without fear. This is fundamentally faith, not blind belief in dogma, but walking out on the word of a consciousness that is somehow part of yourself, trusting a deeper, intuitive knowing, an inner guidance. It's not about setting yourself up to be disappointed if things don't go exactly as planned, but about setting yourself up to learn new miracles, to be open to unexpected positive outcomes and synchronicities.
Learn new miracles. I like that.
It's a creative act, engaging with the potential inherent in the universe. It shifts you from being a passive recipient of fate, just reacting to whatever happens, to becoming an active co-creator of your reality through your inner state.
So how do we engage in this art of hope? Is it about being incredibly specific with our hopes, focusing intensely on one outcome, or is it more general? How do we practice this vital capacity, especially when things look bleak?
The advice given is beautifully expansive and playful, actually. Imagine creating a field of hope within yourself where all your aspirations, your dreams, your quiet longings for yourself and the world shoot out into the stratosphere like beams of light. Imagine them become part of a new glassy surface in which you see beautiful things happening.
Visualizing potential.
Exactly. Then you breathe that in, allowing yourself to dissolve and become part of that hopeful vision, mingling your energy with all the positive things you've hoped for in the past and present. It's described as a place to play, to dream without limitation, not to set yourself up for disappointment if one specific thing doesn't happen, but to actively learn new miracles by aligning with possibility itself.
So don't limit the hopes.
Not at all. The recommendation is to hope for particulars, hope for specifics, hope for generalities. Nothing is too grand or too small. You're encouraged to make a list of 1,000 things you hope for because nothing is too small to be part of your art and nothing is too big to hope for. It's an invitation to unleash your imagination and align your energy with positive potential in every area of life.
That's a truly expansive and empowering view of hope, connecting it deeply to our creative power and inner state, not just external circumstances. And it feels incredibly relevant, maybe even essential, for navigating our current global challenges, where so much feels uncertain and out of our individual control.
Absolutely. This art of hope and the transformative power of prayer, understood here not as mere supplication or begging, but as an active engagement of our internal energies as the medium of miracles, according to the Course, are essential tools for navigating our current global challenges. These challenges, after all, are seen by many of these sources as being intensified, if not caused, by the dysfunction of the egoic human mind, operating on a collective scale: greed, fear, separation, short-sightedness.
Right. The macro reflects the micro.
Precisely. This perspective underscores the immense, often underestimated collective power of conscious people to visualize, pray, use all the powers, the internal powers during times of crisis. When we shift our internal state, when we cultivate hope, inner peace, compassion, and forgiveness within ourselves, those internal states don't just stay inside us, they ripple outward, subtly influencing the collective consciousness, creating openings and potentially enabling solutions that seem impossible from a purely egoic, fear-based perspective. It's a call to actively contribute our positive energy to the future we wish to see, knowing that our internal states truly matter on a scale we might not fully comprehend.
What an incredible journey we've taken together today. In this deep dive, we've really journeyed through the inner landscape, haven't we? Unpacking the pervasive influence of the ego and discovering the expansive nature of our authentic self. That awareness underneath it all. We've explored humanity's ancient spiritual wisdom, seeing how timeless truths about compassion and transcendence emerged from periods of profound societal change during the Axial Age. And we've confronted the often unseen societal forces, the performance society, that subtly shape our understanding of who we are and pull us away from community.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground. We saw how pervasive the ego's influence can be, how that feeling of not enough drives so much, and how societal pressures can create that painful chasm between our organismic self, our true experience, and our constructed self-concept.
But more importantly, I think we've illuminated how ancient wisdom traditions, often supported by insights from modern psychology, consistently point to a clear path of transcendence, a way to cultivate empathy, forgiveness, and to embody a more unconditional love, moving beyond the limitations of fear and separation that the ego thrives on.
Exactly, moving from that constricted state to a more open, aware, and compassionate way of being.
As one of our sources profoundly put it, a beautiful metaphor for our journey today. Life is the dancer, and you are the dance. It suggests this intimate, inseparable connection, a flow that transcends the rigid boundaries of the ego, trying to control everything.
Yeah, you're not separate from it.
Right. So, as you reflect on this deep dive on all these insights and pathways we've explored, what conscious step will you choose to take next? What small adjustment, maybe, to embody the wisdom you've gained? How might you contribute in your own way to what some describe as an unprecedented influx of consciousness currently unfolding on our planet? How can you realize the possibility of transformation that ancient teachers once pointed to as only for a rare few? What if that profound possibility is for you right now in this very moment?